Now, while we're talking obviously about the Arizona immigration case and we're waiting for health care, which is going to be coming down on Thursday, Supreme Court, they also released a pair of other decisions that are going to be felt, trust me, across the country. They're not just getting the headlines tonight. Now, first, the court, they banned mandatory life sentences without parole for juvenile convicts. 5-4 split vote. Justices found it violated the 8th Amendment for cruel and unusual punishment because the sentences didn't account for the age of the defendant or other mitigating factors. Ruling only applies to mandatory life sentences without parole, not cases where juries could have chosen lesser sentences but didn't. It does apply to cases where juveniles are tried as adults. Andrew? What do you think?
I applaud that decision. I absolutely do. And I think we are so hard on crime and so firm with these mandatory minimum sentences that we've codified into law that we tie the hands of a judge who has more of a feel for an individual case to decide what punishment should go with what crime and which criminals. So especially when you're talking about juveniles, the chances for rehabilitation, I don't think you should throw away a life even for horrific crimes committed as teenagers.
But it's still an option on the table, right? If people read into it, if there is the guidelines that allow for sentencing,
if you're talking about something where the judge isn't compelled to hand down a life sentence without parole, it's still an option.
Anybody got a problem with it? I thought it made some sense.
It makes a lot of sense. 13-year-old kid.
The 5-4, actually, and Mark, this is the 5-4 nature of it. There's really 4 justices who.
Yeah, it's strictly an ideological issue. I mean, this is the culmination of a line of cases that have been going through the court, wending their way since 2000 about the permissible punishments for juveniles. First, they ruled out death sentences for juvenile killers, and then no life without parole for non-homicide offenses.
Natural progression.
This is the logical continuation, and they were all decided along the same 5-4 lines.
Now, the other case decided by the court today was a follow-up to the 2010 Citizens United Unlimited Money in Political Campaigns ruling. Now, in today's ruling, the court, once again, 5-4, big shocker, they determined that states cannot regulate corporate campaign contributions. Basically, court said Citizens United, which opened the floodgates, as we know, and we're seeing it this year, Dominic, with the corporate and other cash and campaigns, isn't just for the White House here, or for that matter, Senate or House, but it applies to all levels of state races as well. It also would seem to send a message that the justices got no interest in revisiting Citizens United here. You think when it's all said and done, we as a country are going to regret that decision? Forget about what side you're on in the political aisle. The people, when they see what it's going to be like after November, they're going to be like, as much as I didn't think it was beautiful before, it's a hell of a lot prettier than this pig.
Yes, I think that as a country, that's exactly the way that we're going to feel. It's already disgusting, the money that's involved with politics. But as they would say in a commercial, baby, you ain't seen nothing yet. Because when they're done with the soft money and the super PACs with Romney and Obama, notice I included the incumbent president. Notice that.
Yes, I noticed it very well. Yes. Yep.
It's going to be disgusting. And what's more scary about this is that we can't really trace the money, or you can just, the candidates can hide from the money.
Yeah.
And how do you go about trying to reverse this trend when the corporations and all the big moneyed interests have such an incentive to keep the status quo the way it is? And don't forget, this can really impact people on different levels. Let's take northeastern Pennsylvania, and there are people watching us tonight there, with fracking. You get local races. You could have a mayor's race where an energy company pumps millions of dollars into the race because they get a favorable ruling on a very low level. It really stacks the deck for corporate America.
They're playing it out, by the way, in West Virginia, too, with the mining folks.
People think this country has become corporatized anyway.
Well, there's also a question. When we see these decisions, and you see numbers, 6-3, 5-4, more repeatedly, it gets down to the court. And it's funny, I grew up, you didn't question the credibility of the court. You may not have loved the decision, but you always thought, you got the 9 smartest folks that are sitting on the high court, right? And whatever their ideology, brilliant people who would surprise you once in a while because they were looking either as strict constructionists but they were looking at the law first and foremost. In politics, yes, there's always politics, but it wasn't driving it. I'm not so sure, and I think the polls bear it out, that the consensus is there, especially after we saw Gore v. Bush. All right, take a look here at these poll numbers. And again, these were questions recently asked about, first off, how the Supreme Court makes their legal decisions. And look at the number here when asked here, what was the overwhelming number? Now, legal analysis, I bet you if you asked this question 20 years ago, Mark, that would have gotten the plurality of it. Now, 3/4 of the respondents said that it's because of their personal or their political views. And I'll give you one more poll, and then we'll talk about what this means. In terms of lifetime appointments here, only 1/3 think that that's a good thing, while again, 3 out of 5 say no, that they basically would like to see these be something that is subject to review or for elections. There's a change in perception about how people look at the court. It's just one of 3 branches with some political agenda.
Well, I think the court has always decided cases this way. And it's not just the Supreme Court, it's federal appeals courts where judges are life tenured and district judges too. And in a book called How Judges Think, Richard Posner, who's a federal judge in Chicago, analyzes the problem real well. In most cases, the law is pretty clear, and where the black letter of the law is clear, judges will decide the case according to the law. But in cases where there are gray areas, and most cases that get to the Supreme Court are by definition in a gray area, where the law is unsettled, of course politics are going to enter into it. The difference is before that the politics entered into it covertly, and it was sort of a wink and a nod. And you can partially fault Obama for this, for calling out the justices during the State of the Union address, because that signaled to the rest of the country that it's okay to trash the credibility of the court publicly.
I'm with you, except my only thing is, and maybe it was always this way, but 21st century media never was all over it. But
that's true.
It used to be.
There are no sacred cows anymore in government, courts or otherwise.
But for me, when Scalia goes out and delivers speeches that he knows are being covered and wants everyone to know it and lays pretty clear who's in the room and where he is politically, when Clarence Thomas's wife is active in the conservative movement here and very clear with, I would argue, clear conflicts of interest, that stuff, at least to me, maybe they went to the dinner parties, but now they're telling the world, take a look, I don't care what you think.
Scalia will vote against his politics in all but the most highly charged political cases, such as Bush versus Gore. He will vote against his politics if the text supports his view. Not so with an Alito, who is overtly result and activist oriented despite the conservative lip service. If you want a real danger on the court, look no further than Alito, because Scalia has demonstrated in the past that he will put his politics aside in many, many cases where he will vote in favor of a criminal defense position, even though he's a self-described law and order nut. So look at Alito for that.
All right.